I'm here in Brookville with the Michigan Works Association. Many of you know me from the WIOA orientations that were being done. Prior to that, I worked for a Michigan Works agency for 14 years. Prior to that, I was at the Michigan Works Association. Yeah, I can't figure out who or where I want to be, so it's just kind of like this yo-yo, and they can't get rid of me. So welcome to this Q&A session. This really came out of the June WIOA one-day conference. Many people had given us comments about, we really need more time just to ask questions, and so we asked our panelists, it's like, would you be willing to come in and just punt, really, is what they're doing. They're very concerned about what you may be asking, because they didn't know how to prepare with that. But I will introduce our panelists in just a moment. I want to talk just a minute about, if you are here for a title other than Title I, so if you're here with questions about Title II or Title IV, Title III we could probably handle, maybe, unless you guys want to handle 2 or 4. Okay, if that's the area that you have questions in, you're not going to get answers. But there are these index cards. They were at the end of each row someplace, if you don't have one there. If you have a question and you don't get an answer, or there's not somebody here to answer it, please put your question on here along with a way for me to contact you. We'll try to get you an answer. So that is that. Today, you may already know our panelists, but I certainly want to give them their due respect, and certainly do appreciate them agreeing to do such a thing. And first of all, I'll introduce Joe Billy. He is the director of the Office of Talent and Planning. They have really long titles. The director's fine, but it's like the units they work for are really long. I think you guys should figure out a way to shorten that up. With the Workforce Development Agency. Joe is relatively new with his position, or is relatively new for Joe. However, many of you may know Joe previously from the OSMIS unit. He was the manager of that unit, and certainly we are very pleased to have him in the area of policy now. And we've decided that anything that can't be answered by our panelists will go to Joe, because he can easily say, I'll check into that and get right back to you.
I can write things down.
Next to Joe is Krista Johnson. She is the manager of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act Title I section with the Workforce Development Agency. Again, long. Krista brings a lot of knowledge to the panel, and we're very pleased that she has agreed to be on to join us today. And then on my left, it's like left, right, which is it? Our final panelist is Mike Wormlinger. Mike is the director of the Office of Audit and Finance with the Workforce Development Agency. And again, he agreed to be here as long as he didn't have to wear a tie. So, we really want to try to focus the questions around MIS, program, Title I programming, and finance, those areas, board questions, any of those types of things, certainly we can handle. I don't really have a whole lot of slides here, so don't really look for anything out there. You won't. Just a little bit of information with respect to key dates. Some of this in January, the final rules are to be published. Will they be? We can start a pool, I guess. In March, the state plan is due, which the state is working on that state plan. Certainly, and that will set the levels of new performance and where the new performance indicators will be negotiated. In June, the Department of Labor and Department of Education are to put out information in respect to the 6th performance measurement, which is measuring your effectiveness in serving business. And again, whether or not that will be hit, that date will be hit, we don't know. And then, of course, in July of 2016, the one-stop infrastructure costs are required to take effect, assuming that the state does not have a more restrictive policy. These key dates really come from the law itself. So the way that we're going to operate today is we're going to take questions from you. We will take follow-up questions on that particular subject if we need to, so that we can address it fully. And again, I'd remind you, if there's something that you don't want to ask in front of all these people. You don't want to, would prefer to write it down, you can hand it to Jenna back there and she can bring it up here. And we can ask the question publicly or we'll try to get you an answer. I do want to say a couple of things here in respect to what kind of questions we're not going to field. You're going to hear that we can't handle that. So I talked about the volley. Specifically about credentials. How many of you are here just to ask a question about credentials? Good. Because we're not fielding any credential questions. First of all, I want to say, I hear many people say, just give me a list of approved credentials. There is no such list. There is not going to be such a list. You're going to have to develop your own list locally. So there is a session Tuesday morning, Chelsea Mates is doing that on credentials and really what the requirements are. I would encourage you to attend that session to get that information. And certainly, some of it is we're dependent upon getting more guidance out of Department of Labor around some of those areas. So that's really the only area that I can tell you right now we're not going to entertain those questions. So if you ask that question, I'm going to say, that's a great question. Next. Don't take it personally. So, I don't know if any of you want to make any opening comments.
I just noticed that Mike had a whole bunch of note cards there. I take them away from Lyman right away. Because I'm pretty sure I don't want to answer his questions.
Maggie?
Got it. Did they give you a
So,
instrument?
what are your burning questions? What are your issues? Let me take this one.
Issues and questions are two different things.
So in regards to youth, and specifically the work experience and the requirement for the academic and occupational element, help me understand definition of academic and what is going to be acceptable for that, meeting that academic requirement.
Okay. You ready for that, Krista?
Well, I think there's a little bit that I can say around that, and we're actually incorporating some language around the academic and occupational educational component of the work experience into the new WIOA manual. So you can look for that in Chapter 3, but what we do have in there is that it doesn't have to be concurrent with the work experience, and it's really around ensuring that it's really something, I guess what I can say about it is it's really something that you're going to have to document in the ISS and the case notes, but in terms of providing a specific definition of what that means, that's not something that we really have in here at this point. So I guess can you talk a little bit more about what you're looking for?
I think there's discussion as to, I almost don't want to say it, but does that academic piece, is that going to require credits attached to it, or is something like adult ed, increasing, reading levels, will that be acceptable as academic? Or if you're going through a training program that has clearly defined learning and not just, is that going to be academic, or is it going to require an actual credit attached to it to qualify as an academic element?
Okay. And I think Janet, that's one that I think we need to do more investigation around. Okay. So I think that's one that I want to take down and then come back, perhaps through the dispatch, if we have additional information.
Okay, that's fair. I would ask that you might consider, in terms of academic, can it be, if you get into a contextual work experience, and if I can document what's being done, is that going to be sufficient, as opposed to a formal academic rigor?
Yes. And I think some are saying it's one, and then some are. That was your question, wasn't it? Yeah, because I think some believe that it's the one, and some believe that the other would qualify, and especially if you're talking about youth.
Yep.
If it's credit requirement, that's the other way would definitely be better, easier.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, to piggyback on what you said, if it was a work experience and the employer was sending them to get certification as a welder, would that count as academic for the youth?
I still think I need to come back.
Yeah. So WDA needs to try to get more information. If you specifically want to make sure you get an answer, make sure your information, and at least that topic gets on an index card for me, and I'll make sure it goes to you. Any follow-up question on that particular piece? Okay, I have a question here.
Yes, I would like to know, is it necessary to gather income if a youth is pregnant, ex-felon, food stamps, no high school diploma?
Who do you want the answer to be?
No.
No.
Sorry.
But unfortunately, I think the answer is yes.
It's not gonna be the answer you're gonna get, yeah.
Even though income isn't something that we report the income amount directly to the federal government, we do have to calculate low income. Even if it's not an eligibility requirement, it's still a federal reporting requirement. So even if the person qualifies through other characteristics, we still have to determine low income, we still have to report it, so it does have to be gathered. And I think even on the proposed
Reporting.
I'm trying to think of what it is, it's not the wizard, the Pearl.
Pearl.
They still have a low income element on there. So we do anticipate we do have to calculate low income, which means gathering the income or dollar amount in the family size.
Great. We have a question in the back?
Yes.
Sharon?
Janet, I have a question about the plan, the local plan. When that will be due, when should we expect planning instructions? Is one question. And then my second question is, are we going to have to do a plan for the 10 regions and like a local plan? For instance, we have to do a plan for Great Lakes Bay and then also do a plan for the Region 5.
And I'll take that one. In terms of your first question around when will there be guidance made available to the Michigan Works agencies, kind of outlining the planning process for your local and regional plans. And I think that's something that we're looking to have out this winter, because we know that you're already underway with those planning processes. I think to some degree that's going to depend a little bit upon DOL had an information collection request out here around unified and combined planning, and that information collection request comment period actually closes tomorrow. And so they're actually finalizing at the federal level, they're in the process of finalizing what exactly in terms of the state plans they're looking for in terms of information, because obviously there's components that are listed in the law, so there's items spelled out there that we know we're going to have to address, and then certainly there was some more inkling around what we have to address in the information collection request. So I think if that's something that you're kind of burning to look into right now, the information collection request is a good point to start in terms of what sort of information you're going to need to provide in your plans. But again, we would be hopeful that this winter we could have something out, because certainly we have to have time for you to finish your plans, submit them into us, time for us to approve them and have them in place by next July 1st. And then around, I think the second part of your question was around, you know, if there's more than one local area in your region, are you doing a local plan and a regional plan? And yes, you would be doing that. If your region isn't contiguous in terms of one Michigan Works agency, there would be an expectation in the law that you're working together as a region to put together a truly regional plan. And again, as DOL has sort of intimated to us with our state plan, you know, we have to have all the different titles 1, 2, 3, and 4 in that state plan, and DOL has said, okay, states, we don't want to see a state plan come into us that's just 4 separate plans slapped together and says we're good. So I think take that to heart too as you're considering your regional plans. We're not going to want to see just 2 very separate and distinct plans, or 3 or however many local areas there are in the region sort of slapped together. There's really truly that collaboration, and the regional strategy needs to come through. So does that answer your question,
Yes.
Shannon?
So when you say winter, you mean, would it be after Christmas, I guess?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
I don't know, have you looked at the weather lately?
Very good.
And maybe it needs to come out this coming week.
Yeah, well, it will not be out before Christmas.
All right.
Dave?
Yes, could you talk a little bit about the required self-sufficiency policy that we have to develop locally as required by the Act? Why do we need to do that?
Well, I mean, I think that's something that you need to define locally, and I think as you're serving individuals and there's language in the law around that you're putting them through training that leads to employment where they're self-sufficient, then it's got to be a policy in place that's really sort of mapping out how is that determination made and what is that standard.
So I'm going to go out here on a limb because I'm pretty brazen and willing to make a fool of myself. It was in WIA, and I'm thinking it was in WIOA that says essentially you can get any and all core services, career services now without any testing. But to go beyond that now in WIOA to get training services, you have to be in need of those training services, and if you're employed or need to retain employment, this self-sufficiency becomes the test. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's why you
Okay.
need it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Sometimes I get my laws mixed up. Woohoo! All right, we're done. No other questions? You're all really happy, huh? Let me ask a few.
If we have to have a question, I have one.
Okay.
I know I've emailed a few people at the state about and credential waiver for OJTs. Is your guys'
That was
instinct?
one of my questions. Justin, go for it.
Is your instinct that that's going to be offered? Because if not, you're going to greatly reduce your options for work-based learning if it needs a credential that's defined as essential.
I guess Justin,
Before you answer the question, let me kind of phrase the question a little differently. It says, my Michigan Works agency has an OJT credential performance waiver. You all understand what that is?
under WIA.
Yeah. Can you explain the applicability of the waiver during this program year and subsequent program years? And then, do you think it's gonna live on?
Yep, and there's actually around WIA waivers in general, there's actually a training and employment guidance letter that was published by the United States Department of Labor. So if you haven't had a chance to review that, that's TEGL 1-15, which came out on July 1st. But yeah, we've actually had a lot of inquiries around the OJT credential waiver that many local areas have under WIA and its applicability. And really, while our waivers extend through program year 2015, and we're in the last year then of WIA performance, really that exit cohort for the credential measure is individuals that's exited between last October 1st, so October 1st of 2014, and September 30th of 2015. That is your program year 2015 exit cohort for credential performance purposes. So that's really the extension of that applicability of that waiver is through this last cohort of WIA performance. Therefore, individuals who started exiting on or after October 1st, so just last week, they're not going to be in WIOA performance when it comes to the credential measure, and to which then this WIA waiver would not extend. Now I think, Justin, your question might be a little bit more around, do we think that DOL might entertain a waiver under WIOA that would extend essentially this exclusion? Is that and I mean, at this point, I don't think that we can assume that. We don't have any information that indicates that they would be willing to entertain that kind of waiver or approve it. So I think we have to really move forward under the premise that it's not going to be a waiver that's in place when we're starting to do WIOA performance. But I think this is also an opportunity. I really want to point out, while this was very waiver based, we have a couple of we've had a number of statewide national emergency grants over the last several years. Particularly right now, we have the job-driven national emergency grant out there. And the exclusion of those participants from the credential performance measure is not tied to this waiver. It was the authorizing TEGL or training employment notice that excluded those participants. So I guess I would urge you to keep in mind that your NEG dollars then, if those are the only dollars serving that OJT participant, there's an opportunity there for you to sort of bridge the gap as we're making this transition from having this waiver under WIA and move into WIOA. To continue your on-the-job training while working towards, I would really encourage you to work with your employers. This is certainly a challenge that we've heard loud and clear from the local areas, and we've heard lots of statements around we're not going to be doing on-the-job training anymore. This is really going to kill our program, and we have shared that with the United States Department of Labor and said this is a real concern as we're trying to shift into WIOA. And WIOA has a huge emphasis around work-based learning. So we definitely hear your concern, and we're sharing it with the federal level. I think moving forward, what we can do at this point is, again, using those NEG dollars to sort of bridge the gap. Now is the time then to be having conversations with your employers around, are some of these OJTs appropriate to be credentialed? How do we make that work? Is this a credential you would recognize? And try to move in that route, not knowing that we would have, obviously at this point, we don't have a waiver under WIOA.
And attending Chelsea's session on Tuesday morning to find out what the parameters are for an approved credential.
So as Krista pointed out, and I think as Justin's concern is that the OJT type of training generally doesn't lead to an industry recognized credential, at least in what you're doing there in living community. But does everyone share that same experience, or does anyone have OJT programs that they think they are currently being able to provide an industry recognized credential at the end of it? Is it just that big a problem for everyone that no one has any? I see a lot of heads nodding the same way.
It's a big problem, Joe. I don't think anybody said, oh yeah, we have no problem. Dave, do you have a comment?
Yes, TEGL 315 clearly defines the priority of services for adults, and it references veterans. When it comes to dislocated workers, how do we determine the priority of services for dislocated workers? Because they include veterans, dislocated workers. Do we use the same criteria that the TEGL specifies for adults?
I think, Dave, to clarify, so you're talking about implementing the requirement for the veterans priority of service when it comes to the dislocated worker funds?
Yeah.
Since veterans priority is always in effect, because the other priority of service I think that we're most familiar with is applicable to the adult funds.
Yeah.
And only at the adult funds.
Correct.
So that priority of services for individuals who are receiving assistance, their basic skills deficient, or their something else. I don't remember what the third one is.
Okay, and then for dislocated workers, veterans get the first priority?
Veterans always get.
Okay.
All veterans are always first.
Always.
Okay.
So veterans that meet, if we're talking about adults, we're talking about veterans who meet the priority of service of adults first, then the priority of service people, then other people.
Right, yep, there's a layering that's kind of laid out in that TEGL, how to apply it to adult funds.
Veterans are always first. Now, any questions about funding? I don't want to, or procurement, I don't want to let Mike off the hook. Any question about out-of-school youth, 75%? Or?
I have a question regarding, just curious where the state's at with the eligible training provider list.
Sure.
And
Yep.
what's happening there.
Yep, I can provide an update, and Joe, you can feel free to jump in if you want. So I think as some folks are probably aware, but there's probably others that aren't aware, certainly the eligible training provider list requirement that we had under WIA is continuing under WIOA. And we've had in Michigan our eligible training provider list really since the advent of WIOA has been known as the Career Education Consumer Report. That was a list that we contracted out. We had a private vendor that really handled the day-to-day management of that list on our end. And then of course, out in the Michigan Works agencies, you have staff that are doing the training program approvals. Under WIOA now, we're actually working to transition the day-to-day management of that list in-house to the Workforce Development Agency. And so we are working very closely with DTMB right now. We're going to put that eligible training provider list, we're embedding it into My Talent Connect because we think we want to really leverage the resources and information that are already available on that site. We think the two really go well together. So we're in the process now of building the new eligible training provider list, which we're going to call Michigan Training Connect, or MyTC. And we would expect that this new web-based eligible training provider list will launch in early January of 2016. And we're also updating, so this is going to be really a total revamp of the look and feel of the list, because if any of you have looked at the list lately, I mean, we really haven't done a lot with the look and feel of it, or even the usability of it since it was first created. So we're going to have an updated look and feel. We're going to have increased functionality. You know, just saw a demo the other day of the searching features, capabilities, and they're a lot of the same types of searches, but some enhanced searches. So I think the search function has really been improved. And then also, again, being able to connect, we have some compare features that we're adding in terms of being able to compare programs. So again, just empowering the user with more information. And then we, as required in the law, there's going to be some communications coming out very shortly to both the Michigan Works directors, but also the eligible training providers themselves. As part of the transition process, we actually need to, before the end of the year, essentially reapprove all the programs. So they're going to be asked to update their information. They're going to have around some of the new performance metrics under WIOA, then some additional data they're going to have to supply. So we're going to be going through basically a whole process of cleaning the data on the existing system over the next several months. And then we'll have clean data to then transition into the new MyTC.
So if the current provider does not provide you information by a certain date, you just you take them off?
They will be off the list, and then they would have the opportunity to reapply. And that's in the communication that's going to the providers. It states very clearly that by not updating their information, that that's the consequence. But of course, anyone can always apply at any time to have their program listed.
And Krista, there has been, in the past, when a new provider goes on, a local that provider is in it has to go and make an approval. Mm-hmm. Is there a process in there for the locals that they're going to have to follow?
Yes, we're going to use, at this point I believe we'll be using the existing CECR to do these reapprovals, so it'll be the existing process. But yes, after they've updated their program information, then that's when it will get kicked out then to the Michigan Works agencies for the approvals. And so, again, all this information should be, we've got 2 letters that are coming out here shortly that are going to let the Michigan Works agencies know what their responsibilities are, and then also let the training providers know what theirs are.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Is yours a follow-up, ma'am?
It's along this line.
Oh, okay.
She's,
Is the information the schools have to provide the same under the CECR as it may be?
It's very similar. Like I said, there's a little bit of new information, again, because we have to align the performance outcomes with WIOA, but a lot of it is the same.
One thing we've run into, and this is more of a suggestion than a question, but one thing we've run into as the CECR updates, I believe it's annually, the information, and we've had some schools being requested to update their information recently.
Okay.
And now we're in October, November. If they're updating their information in November and then being asked to cough up some new stuff, they're gonna say, I already did that.
Right.
They're gonna ignore that request.
Okay.
Is there a way to just say, hey, guys, just extend what's out there for a couple of months and do it once?
Yep, that's a great thought, and we will definitely keep that in mind.
Is that follow-up, or I
Yeah.
got one back here?
I have a follow-up question, just in terms of what the responsibilities of MWA will be. Will the data that's inputted be vetted through you all before it comes to us?
We're using the existing processes, so there is that front-end level of checking that's being done now by PPA.
Hi, many of the public funded universities do not have their programs on the demand, they're on the list of approved providers. I'm wondering if there has been any work done to encourage public funded universities to get their programs on the list, which provides greater access to all of our clients.
Right. Certainly, I mean, that's one of the biggest concerns that we had, again, as we saw that really the requirements under WIOA in terms of the burden on the training provider were very similar to what they were under WIA. So certainly that's something that's been an ongoing concern. Certainly those are conversations we can have. I can't say that we've had those, are having those conversations right now. I mean, we're certainly aware of it at our level, but I guess I can't say that we've specifically reached out to the publicly funded universities or community colleges and made a concerted effort at this point to have them put their training programs on there. I mean, I think what I've heard in the past, a lot of it comes back to, because the burden is so great and then they only see a few students come through their classrooms, it's just, not worth their time.
That are WIOA funded.
Right.
Or WIOA
So
funded.
I mean, that's certainly something that we recognize as a challenge, and it's something that we can look at if we can positively impact as we move forward. I think right now, given the crunch of the time frame that we're in to sort of get all these reapprovals done and get the new system up, that's sort of been our focus at this point. But yeah, certainly our longer term focus and discussions we've had around is, and not only those providers, but also around apprenticeships. Work-based learning is a huge focus under WIOA. How can we get more apprenticeships on the list and really have that be a more viable option? So that's definitely in the arena. So we are kind of looking at that long term. How can we increase the access to the programs on the list and the quality of the programs?
The other thing, just a second, we've got a couple of questions in the audience, but I've been a part of some conversations where I believe there's staff at the state who are actually looking at where's that information being reported someplace else, and could we do some information mining, if it is, to transfer that over, as opposed to having those institutions have to resubmit it, which would actually be very advantageous, I think, to the system.
Like Krista said, I think the current thrust is to recreate what we have, make some minor improvements, enhancements, but just have the MITC out there on time. But what Janet's referring to is an initiative that we have in the state where we're trying to link information in the state's student database to information in the workforce system, whether it's information for people going through workforce programs or the employment information that we have through different administrative databases. The challenge has always been that in that school database, there's a lot of information, but there's no way to connect it to the outcome information in the employment databases, because one uses a student identifier, the other uses a social security number, and we just haven't had the processes in place to kind of join those. That's as a longer term solution, we're trying to do that, and if we can get information for the student side linked to the employment side, I think we might be able to do a lot of the outcome reporting that some of these public universities, it sounds like, are reluctant to do because of the burden. So longer term, that's something that might really ease the reporting burden for a lot of these educational providers.
Much more helpful. Okay, Laura.
Follow up. I know you may not be able to answer this because it's new to the state as well, but do you anticipate when a school submits a new program for approval, what the expected turnaround time will be? Because quite often the education institutions ask us, how long will it be before we know if it's approved, before it's going to be sent to the WD or MWA, so that we can look at approving it?
I mean, I think because we're bringing this in-house, certainly those types of processes and procedures are something that we're working on putting in place right now. I think a lot of it's going to be dependent upon the completeness of the information and if there's follow-up that's needed. But certainly that's something that we'll be looking at in our processes and procedures, and we're going to want to be as timely as possible. So we are going to have staff that are dedicated to handling our end of it so that we can get it out to you as quickly as possible for approval.
Is that something when further information comes out to the MWAs, you'll put in there the expected, or just so we have an idea? Because again, we're being asked by the education entities, how long is this going to take? You know, we're providing them the information on the steps they need to take to complete the process. So
yeah, I think that's something that we could look at including in our policy manual that we have around the eligible training provider list. Certainly that's all built around the CECR right now. So again, once we you know, really know what the site is going to look like and how it's operating, we're also looking at and examining our policy that's out there. So that's something that we could look at addressing in there.
I had another question back here someplace first. No? Okay.
A lot of MWAs did RFPs for their adult dislocated worker and youth programs in the spring of this year. A lot of them are 2- and 3-year cycles. I'm wondering, with the changes in WIOA, do you see anything that's going to require the MWAs to again do an RFP for their programs?
And again, what do you want the answer to be?
No. We guessed as close as we could.
There's not a significant change in the contract itself, no, it wouldn't need to be rebid.
Good.
And I trust in your RFP.
You got his answer, he's all set.
I trust in your RFP, language has said something about, you know, any changes as the regulations come out, what have you, which will cover you. So.
Yeah, we got it as close as we could. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Easy crowd. Performance?
I'll try to ask them like a question. You may not be that, but on the MOUs, is there any, we've done a couple, okay, off the draft, and where we struggle with the cost sharing piece. Is there any?
How did you handle the cost sharing prior?
We didn't have to do it.
You didn't have a must-have activity?
Well, you did, they either had rental agreements, you know, and that's how it may have been handled, is through a rental agreement as opposed to it being incorporated into the MOU. I mean, the MOU said referred to the rental agreement.
Yeah,
And honestly, I think that's where we're going to struggle, because we have to somehow identify infrastructure costs in order to go through this process. And I know in the past we've always given statewide activity out as one-stop allocations to help run the one-stops. And the partners in your service centers, they were either paying you back in rent, or they were bringing something else to the table, and it wasn't as necessarily formalized. So I think the challenge now becomes, since it's so much more restrictive in the WIOA language about infrastructure costs and how everybody has to participate in that cost, we're going to have to be able to identify what that cost is, so we can ask partners to share in it. So it's really an opportunity to start identifying these costs, and it's just full-fledged one-stop centers that the law addresses. It's not all your service centers, but you're going to have to be able to identify those costs so your partners can participate in them.
Yeah, because the format we're using allows for actual cost plus there is an in-kind, which is an exchange of services.
Right.
Both are in the documents.
Right.
One we went with the money way, and the other one we're looking at.
The money way is always good.
Well, but the other one we're looking
right.
at. So, that can be kind
And I have a question about a couple of draft policies. One is the MOU, it's in draft, and the WIOA manual. Is there any timeline in terms of official policy?
The WIOA manual will be out final soon. We had a tremendous response in comments, and so to the draft that was put out in June. And so staff have carefully, went through all those comments and considered them and made appropriate updates. And then certainly if we've gotten, any clarifications from DOL, which really have been few and far between, we've made sure to include those. But the final version of the WIOA manual will be out soon. Is the MOU policy that you're asking about? I mean, that one at this point is still in draft status, and I'm not sure what the timetable is for the release of that for review and comment.
Okay, the later the better.
To the extent it's a living document, when you try to write a couple of them, you have more questions than you did before you tried it.
Other questions? Yes.
In the WIOA MIG specifically, you could use 999 or XXX or
Customer satisfaction
yeah.
survey.
In the WIOA manual, it doesn't have that for the phone number in there. So would we just leave it blank?
As far as the data system, it still operates the same way. So I would, if you're talking about the employer phone number, putting in the 3 X's in front of it, please continue to do that. Yeah, and I can make a note here that we should change the WIOA manual format.
And just to fill in the gap for anybody who's like, I don't have a clue what they're talking about, under WIOA with our 7 performance measurements, there were 2 customer service performance measurements. One was for the job seeker, one is for employers. If an employer, by virtue of you in your outcome data, when you exited a person and if they exited employed and you were putting that employer information in there, if you didn't put in the 3 X's, as Joe had indicated, they were pulling that employer and they were doing a survey to that employer in terms of their satisfaction with the program. Well, if you can imagine, many of these employers are like, what? Who? I didn't do anything with that program, because that customer, that job seeker is the person who is really your customer, not that employer. So that is still in play for this particular program year.
Yes.
And so, as he indicated, they will include that in the WIOA.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, Janet, that really, I mean, the way customer satisfaction is done right now is very WIA driven, and we're in our last year of performance for WIA. So certainly the possibilities are open for what customer satisfaction may look like in the future, because we're no longer tied to what we were tied to under WIA. We're just finishing out this last year of performance.
Other questions? Dave?
Procurement one for Mike. This has to do with lease procurement requirements. Mike, when we release an RFP looking for like office space and we get minimal responses, how can we get at the available property that's out there when we go to the realtor database and see all kinds of good stuff that they didn't respond to the RFP or is better than the proposal we got? How can we get at the good stuff so we can get the best deal?
Are you doing outreach before you release the RFP by contacting these realtors and saying, hey, we're going to be looking for office space, we need you to submit a bid to these proposals that are going to be coming out?
Well, the outreach would be the realtors would receive a copy of the RFP. I guess I'm questioning, do we even need to do an RFP? Couldn't we just have a realtor do a search and look what's there and pick the best one?
No.
For what?
Because there's usually other things that you're looking at with a lease. You're looking at parking, you're looking at the location, you're looking at different things, how customer friendly is it going to be. So those things kind of don't necessarily make price the overriding factor. So when you're putting it out for bid, you're saying, we're going to rate you more highly if your location's good, if you don't have to do a lot of capital expenditures to improve the building for access to the public.
Okay.
So I think it's not an uncommon question, and I think if you do your due diligence beforehand and you do the outreach and you say, you know, this is federal money, we have to follow the guidelines and the standards, please, you know, formally submit a bid so we can reach out and lease your properties. I mean, these realtors want to lease their properties, that's how they make their money. So if they have to jump through a couple hoops to get a federal contract or a contract supported by federal dollars, I would hope they'd be willing to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Always gotta be prepared. This one is to Krista and Joe. I don't know which one of you will field it. It says the comment period for the information collection for the WIOA Performance Information and Reporting System just closed on September 21st. And you all know that they put out these proposed rules. You want to get a feel for kind of what the performance is going to look like. They put out all these rules around that area. However, again, Michigan submitted a significant number of questions and comments regarding the proposed rules. The most significant issue, in my opinion, was how they are suggesting an exit within a program year would be treated, which essentially what they have in the proposed rule is that if your customer exits in a program year, let's say they exit in January, they come back in May, that's 90 days later, but they came back in the same program year, it would undo the exit and, okay? So my question is, can you tell us if this has been an issue with your counterparts around the country? Is this a discussion item? I know we've commented on it with respect to Michigan.
Yeah, in some of the different webinar trainings, or not really a training, where USDOL has had an opportunity for states to kind of chime in on things. This is one that that many of the states mentioned, this exit and then undoing an exit, or if you have multiple exits during a program year, using the last exit date for all of the exits or participations during that program year is problematic, both from a system standpoint and for an outcome calculation standpoint. So the simple answer is yes, I think there's a lot of states that are concerned about it, but I guess the more complex answer is, you know, we don't know if USDOL is going to listen to this. We don't know really what the thought was as to why they would make this type of decision. I can't imagine any state is really in favor of removing exits just because someone participates again during the program year. So whether they're looking for something that really measures continuity of service as opposed to these individual participations, you know, the thought behind it really hasn't been explained, but yes, I think it's something that many states commented on and which they would change.
I'm hoping for lots of comments so that it'll go away. So, thanks. And Krista, a question about the joint proposed rules that were out and DOL's proposed rules. Certainly in your circle of national meetings, you get a sense that any of the comments are resonating with DOL because we sent a ton of them.
Right. I think it's hard for me to say if they're actually resonating with DOL, but I think what DOL has said is that in response to the notices of proposed rulemaking that they published, they received an unprecedented amount of comments, and they actually refer to them as quality comments, and they said that they're really taking time to thoughtfully consider all of those comments as they're preparing to issue the final regulations. They're considering those comments also in the context of other feedback that they've gotten, whether it's via webinar or they've done a number of listening sessions, or if they're just out and about at a regional meeting. So I think if you hear Byron speak, what the message that he is relaying is that they are carefully considering those as they're looking to make the final regulations.
Good. Any other questions out there?
I don't know if it can be answered.
Anything can be answered. I told them if they're comfortable with it, I'll make up answers for you.
I know we're in cycle 3 season right now for monitoring. For next year, when we get into cycle 1 and 2, and the NWAs that have merged recently, do we foresee those cycles to be still individual NWAs as they are now, or were?
Yes. Because we're gonna go through the closeouts to make sure that as the sitting fiscal agent is closing out and transferring to the new fiscal agent, that everything was, so you'll see the financial reporting being done, you'll see those types of closeouts being looked at to make sure that all the closeouts are happening appropriately, and all the expenditures have been reported back into the state.
So if we had a new fiscal agent, say as of October 1st, it won't be, you know what I mean, it'll still be just when you're an individual NWA?
If you're not gonna be the surviving fiscal agent, all your grants were forced into a 9/30 closeout period. So you're gonna have to do closeout reports for all the current existing grant awards. So those are what's gonna be reviewed during cycle 1 of next year. So, because you'll have the traditional 6/30 closeouts, but then every single grant closed out 9/30 for you. So they're gonna go through for financial reporting and look at those closeouts that you submitted as of the 9/30 date, which is really November 20th, I think, you have November 30th, I think, to actually submit those.
Thank you.
Dave,
I got another one.
you must have them just rolling through your head back there.
I'm on a roll. The draft WIOA manual, references how we're gonna obtain an employer satisfaction score. And it talks in there about FWA submitting a list of employers rather than you extracting data from the MIS or, the employer contact, which seems a much better way to me. When are you gonna start doing that? When are we going to start submitting our list?
Maybe it wasn't clear. We've always accepted what we call supplementary lists of employers from Michigan Works agencies to be part of the WIA employer customer satisfaction survey. So Dave, we've always accepted those lists, and you can submit those now. It doesn't replace the process of taking employer names out of OSMIS to survey those as well. But you can certainly provide other employers that you've worked with that maybe aren't in OSMIS. Maybe it's a job fair you've done, or you've screened resumes or something like that. And I can give you an Excel worksheet template to provide that information, and we will incorporate those into our monthly customer satisfaction surveys that are done for employers.
Can I ask, are you getting them from Asset?
No, we're not.
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Would we send those to you? Who do we send those to?
Yeah, right to the new MIS manager, but
If you want that information, please make sure you put it on one of these cards and your email address, and we'll make sure that that Excel spreadsheet goes to you and who to send them to.
Yep, we can do
It's
that.
probably the easiest way to make sure that we get the information to you.
I got one.
Any other questions? The youth questions were pretty easy. Yes, Carrie?
I do have a question. I have been pulling reports for adult and DW population, and I noticed that they're still continuing to capture core intensive training activities. Am I correct in understanding that reports are not going to be updated or changed to show the career service category until PY16? Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, at least we don't expect that we're going to get to that until sometime next year. We have kind of our own crosswalk between what was, self-service core, staff assistant core, intensive, and training, to what would be career services. I mean, the training's pretty obvious, but it's nothing official. So I don't want to change reports and then have to change them again in another, 4 or 5 months. So it's probably not until PY16, Carrie, that we're going to be updating those things.
Okay, that's helpful to know because we've always incorporated those numbers into contracts and measured them on a quarterly basis in that way. So we'll just try to make them equivalent to
now
current intensive.
Now we can't change them because Carrie says don't do it.
So I just wanted to make sure, so I could make sure I was letting people know.
Yes.
The youth question. The question, the answer that came out at the June conference talked about youth with high school completion.
certificates of completion. I've been told different things. What are we supposed to count them as coming in? If a youth has a certificate of completion, are we supposed to count them as dropouts? Or are we supposed to count them as graduates? I've been told both, so I need to know what to do.
I think I prefer to answer that one offline.
Okay, please write your information on the card.
Your information.
We all
We all have that. Why does that have to be offline?
We all have cards for that one.
We all have that question.
Yeah.
It sounds like we probably need to make sure that we're consistent with what's been
Once we get
put
an
out
answer,
officially.
I will amend
Yeah.
these
Correct.
so that the answers will be in the presentation. I'll put a set of slides of Q&As, so you all can get them.
Because I think it's more making sure we give a consistent answer and that we have some information behind it as to why we're answering it this way, instead of causing more confusion. So it's not so much offline as after research that we want to answer it.
Okay, anything else? It's hot enough in here, you ready to go? Well, okay, then with that, thank you very much. We will see you all at the reception tonight. So we'll go out and our state of. Thank you. Sorry.